So this week we learned about corporate compliance problems and resolutions with a scenario in a hospital. So the cath lab at a hospital serves a large urban area with cardiologists utilizing the facility for procedures. So the new finance manager uncovered a lot of potential cost-saving opportunities by consolidating vendor contracts, which will lead to a significant annual savings, but there's resistance from the cardiologists due to their affiliations with different product vendors, and most of that is driven by financial incentives and professional relationships. So during this presentation, it will analyze the corporate compliance problems and medical staff bylaws in the case, and will provide legal foundation to provide a comprehensive understanding. In addition, recommendations will be proposed to address and identify the challenges and issues along with legal recommendations for process improvement and in order to mitigate legal risks. So for corporate compliance problems and resolutions, one of the concerns or the problems is the anti-kickback statute violations. So many of the payments that vendors made to cardiologists can violate the federal anti-kickback statute. And as we know, the statute prohibits the exchange of anything in value in effort to reward the referral of business reimbursable by federal health care programs. It was also found that each cardiologist was paid large amounts by their vendor depending on their involvement with either stents or catheters. And the federal kickback statute states that any kickbacks, bribes, rebates, or anything that includes a transfer of anything of value in cash, whether made indirectly or directly, is considered a violation. So as a resolution, it's very important to educate the cardiologist about legal implications or receiving such payments and terminating any agreements that may be in violation of the statute. So education and training are extremely important. It's not only important during orientation when they are first hired, but also ongoing educational activities throughout their employment. The second problem was the Stark Law violation. So these are arrangements that are made between a cardiologist and the vendors they prefer, and it can also implicate the Stark Law. So under the Stark Law, it prohibits physicians from referring Medicare patients for designated health services to entities where they have a financial relationship. So cardiologists are referring medical and Medicare patients to cardiac catheter services to the cath lab and maintain financial relationships with vendors that were constituted as a Stark Law violation. So as a resolution, it's important to ensure referral relationships comply with Stark Law exceptions or safe harbors. Other resolutions can include restructuring financial arrangements, disclosing financial relationships, and ensuring compliance with the law. So it's very important for these cardiologists and providers to be very transparent with their employers. So medical staff bylaws, problems, and resolutions. So the first one is conflicts of interest. The involvement of cardiologists in consultations, development, or in patents of stents or catheters with their preferred vendors definitely creates a conflict of interest. These conflicts, a lot of times they create bias with doctors, not only that, but the cardiologists when it comes to clinical decision making. And that can ultimately compromise patient care and undermine the public trust in the healthcare system. It's very important, as a patient, to know that you're getting the best care possible because that's the best clinical decision, not because the cardiologist is affiliated with the vendor. So as a resolution, it's important to implement policies and procedures and ensure to include identifying, disclosing, and managing of any potential conflicts. In addition, it's important for any provider that may be part of decisions dealing with conflicted interests to be excluded. So this ensures key patient care decisions are made based on clinical evidence and patient needs rather than financial considerations. The second problem is influence of vendors. So this creates a potential problem for suppliers and vendors and can influence healthcare providers' decision-making processes and can lead to biased choices when it comes to product selection or patient care. And evidence for this, for vendor influence, is evident in this scenario because throughout the frequent visits, talks, and sponsored events. So these interactions between cardiologists and vendors, it creates opportunities for vendors to promote their products And they provide biased information because they are obviously trying to get a sale. They're trying to make their product look the best. So they're biased in that sense, not thinking that their product is the best for patient care. And that can influence a provider's decision regarding the selection of stents and catheters for patient procedures. So as a resolution, it's important to involve implementing guidelines to limit vendor interactions, ensuring transparency in vendor relationships, and promoting evidence-based decision-making. So when it comes to administrative recommendations for the finance manager, one of the recommendations is incentivize cost-conscious behavior. So it's important to develop incentive program or create performance metrics to reward cardiologists for cost-conscious behavior and adherence to cost-saving initiatives. And it's also important to encourage collaboration and teamwork to achieve cost-saving goals while maintaining high standards of patient care. Another recommendation is centralized purchasing. It's important to implement centralized purchasing practices and protocols to streamline processes. By consolidating and creating a centralized purchasing and product selection across the organization, cost savings can be maximized without compromising quality or patient outcomes. Lastly, it's communication with providers, which is important. It's important to communicate with cardiologists and understand their perspectives with their vendor choices, and also emphasize the importance of cost-saving measures for sustainability of the cath lab. Lastly, it's important to look into alternative cost-saving measures that are acceptable to cardiologists, such as negotiating discounts with their preferred vendors to optimize resource allocation. So legal recommendations for process improvements in this scenario, a hiring of a compliance officer. They have the authority and power to carry out the duties related to the laws and regulations of governing compliance, such as the following, as we learned from Broderick: overseeing and monitoring implementation of a compliance program, developing, coordinating, and participating in compliance program training and ensuring all training materials are up to date, investigate any reports that may concern unethical or improper business practices and monitoring and corrective actions, audit and monitor billing activity, and ensure staff is trained to prevent any submissions of inaccurate claims, and keeping records of any compliance records and activities, such as training materials, maybe having forms where the cardiologists sign off after a training session so that they were there and that they understood, to protect themselves and, most importantly, for the healthcare facility to protect themselves. The second is enhanced compliance training, providing comprehensive compliance training to all stakeholders, physicians, nurses, and administrative departments to ensure that all are made aware of all legal requirements and obligations. And then lastly, vendor relationship policies. So it's important to develop and implement policies and procedures for governing interactions with vendors, including guidelines for vendor visits, gifts, and sponsored events. Once again, transparency is very important. It's important to ensure transparency and accountability in vendor relationships to minimize the risk of undue influence and conflicts of interest. So in conclusion, this scenario presented highlights of the critical importance of addressing conflicts of interest and ensuring the compliance with legal requirements in healthcare procurement and vendor relationships. So by prioritizing compliance with regulatory requirements and ethical standards, the organization can mitigate risks and uphold the integrity of clinical decision-making to safeguard patient care. That is all for today, and thank you very much.